Protesters across the country not the only ones weighing in on the grand jury decision not to indict Officer Daniel Pantaleo in the Eric Garner case. Politicians are also speaking out, and yesterday Dominic spoke with Councilman Jumaane Williams.
At a time like this, I think we have to encourage civil disobedience because it can't be business as usual. I want to see uncomfortableness, and I want to see people feeling uncomfortable about what's going on because no one's listening. So I can never encourage destruction of property. I can't encourage things that I don't think will be constructive, but business as usual is not what I can encourage either.
That's an interesting point. You've got a city councilman, a lawmaker, encouraging civil disobedience, which of course is everybody's rights, but he represents the people who are protesting and also the people who are being impacted by those protests. Scott, you're a former county executive. That's a fine line for a public official to put himself into. Is there a danger there?
I think there is, and I think he crossed it. I think he
really?
crossed it, yes, because his job is to change the laws. His job, in fact, was to provide the laws to begin with. His police department are the ones who enforce the laws. To suggest that people violate it, as I said earlier, it's a stain on literally the purpose of an elective office.
But if he feels there's an injustice and that these protests might help, how much of a factor should that be in weighing the value of what he said?
Well, look, I think there's a value in civil disobedience, and I'm not so concerned about minor infractions. If you're looting and breaking property, and so that's not, I don't think he was talking about that. I hope he wasn't talking about that, and I certainly am not talking about that. The folks that sat at lunch counters were breaking the law, and if that's the issue, and if it's limited in that sense where it's making people uncomfortable, but there are signs of civil disobedience, I'm all for that. But to your point about legislation, one of the things that I hold him and other members of the council accountable for is that we need to start seeing legislation on the table now. We've spent so much time talking about legalizing marijuana, but that actually doesn't solve the problem of police brutality and creating a better relationship between community and police. That's what I need to see happen.
I want to play a little more sound from a few other New York officials, and I want to get your reaction to it. Let's play those clips.
It doesn't make sense in America that someone arguably committing a low-level crime is dead and that their family doesn't get a day in court. And so I think it is really important that the Department of Justice do a full investigation.
Shalane and I have had to talk to Dante for years about the dangers that he may face. We've had to literally train him, as families have all over this city for decades, in how to take special care in any encounter he has with the police officers.
What police officers felt yesterday after that press conference is that they were thrown under the bus. We need to teach our children and everyone that you cannot resist arrest, even if you believe that the arrest is unjust.
Basil, we've heard from a few places comments along the lines of what Pat Lynch said. First of all, do you feel like de Blasio threw the NYPD under the bus? And this whole notion of, well, if he only just hadn't resisted arrest, Eric Garner would be alive.
So very quickly, I think that he did not throw the NYPD under the bus. He was trying to communicate and empathize with both protesters and families and communities that are most effective. I think the issue here is that it's the first Democratic mayor in 20 years. Therefore, you are not going to get a strong, full-throated support for police as they enjoyed for the last 20 years. On the resisting arrest, to be honest, I tell young people this all the time. Always follow police commands, because you will not win that argument. You will not win that moment. I think that there may have, and I've talked to other police officers about this, I do think there was a moment where it looked like he was resisting arrest, but the reality is he wasn't going anywhere. He wasn't going to run. He didn't have a gun. He was outnumbered, and they could have taken him down without using that kind of force.
You know who doesn't resist arrest? For them, it's white-collar criminal. Like most people do resist arrest because nobody wants to be arrested. But Scott, I'm curious your take on Pat Lynch, and do you think de Blasio threw the police under the bus?
No, I don't think it was that strong. I don't think his comments were very well taken. I think you're absolutely right. There's an issue here. You don't resist arrest, however you do it. And there were African-American officers there supervising. This isn't, I think de Blasio and others literally raised the race issue because of the sensitivities in Ferguson, which are very real, that may not have to have been raised. The fact of the matter is that an officer, I think, used excessive force, and that's the issue, whether it was a black man or a white man or what have you. So I think de Blasio's out of line. I think using his children as an example, I mean, we understand. We try to understand. Be careful about this, okay? We understand what happens to black folks, to people of color, more often than white. But to begin to do this over an officer who is trying to deal with a person who is resisting arrest, I think is an important issue. And
I'll say, to your point, I think it's a really important point to be made, that it's not just about race. It's about power and the use and abuse of authority. And the race issue comes in, I think, all too often because it is overused and abused, the power in communities of color. But the fact is, there were African-American officers there, there were EMTs of color, and they let him die on the ground.
We got to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to hear from Reverend Al Sharpton and also what could be some bombshell breaking news on the Bridgegate story in New Jersey. We'll get to that right after this.